atheism is not an intellectual issue. It is a moral one. My name is Gustaf of Klint, and I'm part of the Swedish mission team. And I'm here to preach to you about the atheist delusion. The atheist delusion. Arguably the greatest and most evil delusion mankind has ever faced since the dawn of creation. A delusion which has the wellspring for all evil and all the godless movements of our time. It is a delusion I've not only witnessed in the world, but it's slowly been trying to sneak its way into the very kingdom of God. Atheist, the opposite of a theist. The word comes from the Greek word Athiest, which means godless. This is not just a charge for the atheist, but it is a charge for the godless. It is a charge for everyone in this room, and even including me. Everyone needs God. The delusion does not take God out of the equation, however. It merely replaces him. So, when you think about the atheist delusion, it is really about who is God. The atheist does not believe in an all-powerful deity, but he certainly makes himself one. He certainly believes that people are God. How did he come to this conclusion? The atheist sees suffering and thinks, well, if suffering exists, why does God allow that? Suffering surely must be evil. So there's only two conclusions. Either God is evil or God does not exist. Now, who would want to follow an evil God, he thinks. So instead he chooses to believe, well, God simply does not exist. Now, if God does not exist, then there's only one thing to direct your attention to. Only one thing left that gives you protection, which is people. They become the atheist's God. The atheist becomes the ultimate people pleaser. The atheist swiftly finds himself in a moral conundrum, though, because people, if you haven't noticed, they are imperfect. They're kind of evil. They cause a lot of suffering. So when the atheist sees all the evil that people do, he thinks, but what is going on here? They're causing suffering too. So he becomes resentful. He becomes resentful towards the only God he has, people. So you see, when people are your God, distrust becomes your greatest friend. What's his solution? You see, turning himself into a God. He only puts trust in himself and creates his own moral foundation. He becomes God, preacher, and congregation in his only one-man religion. He just made morality subjective. The problem is that he notices how poor of a God he is, because he causes himself suffering all the time by going against his own moral standards. It is hypocrisy, which actually causes real depression. Walking around suicidal is not something he wants to do, though. So what does he do? He changes his moral standard to fit his actions at the time. Does it sound familiar? It's religiosity. That's religiosity. That's why this charge is not only for the atheist. Someone who breaks the moral standard, the Bible, and then changes their interpretation in order to fit their action. All to escape suffering. He solves this very neatly by saying, just preach about forgiving yourself. A concept increasingly common, even in the kingdom. Let me for once quote the Pharisees in a good sense. Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Stop preaching forgiving yourself, church. It is evil. You are not God. Try forgiving your own bank debt. See how well that works. When the atheist hears God, he hears uncaring for his pain. When the atheist hears Christian, he hears hypocrite. When the atheist hears church, he hears cult. When the atheist hears Bible, he hears means of control. All because he can't relate anything besides his view of people. People are uncaring. People are hypocrites. People want control. The atheist dreads taking responsibility. It terrifies him because taking responsibility would mean admitting that he is evil. Breaking down the very last defense he has. Breaking down the very last God he has. Atheism is not an intellectual issue. It is a moral one. In Proverbs 19:22, it says, what a person desires is unfailing love. Better to be poor than a liar. Unfailing love in Hebrew means forgiveness. The atheist is horrified that he would need forgiveness, and yet it's the only thing that he truly desires. I used to be so angry at the Christians, saying, how can imperfect people preach a perfect message? They really shouldn't. I really shouldn't. There is only one solution though, forgiveness. That's how an imperfect people preaches a perfect message. So I got a few practicals for you, church. Never complain, because the atheist sees you view suffering just as they do if you do. Something to be avoided, something you don't want to go through. Love and serve each other like never before. Because the atheist sees only when you serve them and when you love them, they only see you, well, you just want to impress me. That's what they do. But when you love the church, the disciples, they see that your love is true. Show mercy like never before. The world is merciless. Be different. Have a great example. Since the atheist worships people, he wants to see great examples to take into his own godliness. With that great example, give God all the glory. Take no credit at all. Atheist sees you just like him if you do. You take credit because you think you're God. If you take credit, the atheist reverts right back to people worship. Don't play God because your name does not matter. Only God's does, and to God be all the glory.